Hi there, friends. Roxanne Steed here. So I had a request the other day to do a demo, another demo on um, drawing and painting rocks, big boulders, in fact. So around here in Connecticut, where we live, there are tons of rocks. There's little ones too, like this. This one's from Ireland, but there's huge ones. Excuse me. So you can see this is a really smooth one. It's been polished by lots of water. I found it on a beach there, and it's really quite smooth. There's a couple little cracks and divots in there, but for the most part, it's really smooth. So around here, there's smooth rocks, and then there's big, um, excuse me, angular rocks, depending on where they're sitting. So let me pop down to my webcam and we'll talk a little bit more about this. So, one of the things, if you're up in New England anywhere, you're going to see a ton of rock walls. And these, most of them have been around for ages and ages, and because they were all in the ground. So, farmers, as they were plowing up their fields, they had a lot of this stuff to move, and then they would stack them in walls to kind of designate their fields. And so they're everywhere. You'll be walking in the woods and you'll come across a stone wall if it, was a happened to be a farm property ages ago. So anyway, you can see here this was at a little preserve not far from us, and I had embellished this with ink to give a lot more definition to the edges. But you can see where they're stacked in a wall. Maybe some of these rocks are like big versions of this, but some of these have, there's some varied shapes in here. And some of them are probably angled into the ground. Um, but one of the things I want you to notice about rocks is that a lot of times when we see the bottom stacked, setting on the ground, it's going to be horizontal with the ground. And there's going to be, rocks have a lot of angles. Some of them are not smooth, so they have some sharp edges where they've cleaved off of another rock face. And, if you've got a crack in a rock, what happens up here? You might have a little crack, water gets in there, and water is so strong it can bust up a rock. So all it takes is some freezing temperatures. You get water in a crack, subject it to winter up here, and you've got cracking, and it will eventually break up larger rocks. Anyway, you can see where I've added some shadow sides, and then there's sides where the light is hitting a lot. Um, some of this I've added with, a little more cross hatching with ink pen, but, most of it you can do with paint. Anyway, that was a fun little sketch, but the thing that brought this up the other day was this scene at the beach. And there's this one area, there's this beach nearby us that's, when you walk to the southern end of the beach, there's these boulders that, you've got your nice sandy place, and then you've got big slabs of boulders, and then there's some cedar trees up here, and then there's some smaller boulders, tons of rocks piled up here, rocks and seashells, all kinds of stuff. I want you to notice down near the water's edge, there's a lot of dark where the water line is. This is another version of it. I have two classes, so one was for the morning class, one was the evening. But one of the things that I do want to talk about with drawing, let me find a clean piece of paper. Here we go. So when you're drawing rocks, especially ones that border in water, well, let's find our horizon line first. We're going to just draw our horizon line across the page. And say there's rocks coming down. These are big boulders that are sitting in essentially the ocean. And there's one after another, and they kind of join up here. And there's this top shelf of dirt and soil and grasses and briars and trees and whatever. But down within the water line, where these rocks extend, we've got all these kind of jagged edges coming out. And what I want you to notice is on this edge, there's this one edge where the water comes up to. And, maybe it looks like there's a curve going around, and there might be a slight curve. But remember, when you pour water, say you've got a cup, I want you to hold a cup of water in front of you and just look at a glass of water, and that water stays, if you're holding it still, that water stays pretty flat. It reaches a level. Water reaches a level. Water only, makes an up and down movement if, so you're not going to have a lot of, movement here, or um, you're not going to have tilted angles like this or like that, because the water reaches a horizontal level. So as we're standing down here and we're looking out across here. So I want you to think about where, how the water lays. So if you're either, at a beach up in New England, or if you've, only got photographic references to look at, I want you to look really carefully, because, at first when we start drawing, we draw what we think we're seeing and we don't really slow down enough to look. And I just recently, this past week, gave a class in blind contour drawing, where you had to actually stare at the item and then draw the image. So anyway, say these rocks come down a little further, and then we have just these low boulders that are on the ground. Maybe there's a stack of them. Some are tall and lumpy, and there's some that are in front of the others. Maybe some have a little more squared off face, where something has broken off of it. I mean, I've seen huge boulders that were bigger, as big as a bus. Oops, it looks like my screen has frozen up. Please come back. Oh, I hate it when Zoom does this. I'll keep talking and hopefully this will kick in. So anyway, I have seen a pair of, oh, let's see if we can get this back. All right, Zoom, come on, behave. All right, so I've seen a large boulder. It's down here at one of the beaches, and this thing was as big as a bus. And I first saw it um, almost, probably 25 years ago, because my kids were little and they were climbing on this rock with my husband. And I have a photograph of them sitting on top of this big rock that they clambered up. Over the years, we had moved away, moved back. It's a Navy town, so we were in and out with the Navy, came back, and over many years, I had seen this big rock split in two. And so, big rocks can split into smaller rocks. So I just found that interesting. Anyway, so let's bring this beach scene around here. Here's the shoreline where the water comes up. But we have some rocks here. Some might be behind these front ones. Maybe you've got one that's kind of tall and has more angles. Let's get that little shoreline out of there. So, as you're looking at rocks, see, oh, here goes Zoom again. Hopefully this thing will behave. I don't know why this is doing that. It did this Tuesday also. Anyway, so just, be mindful of where your water line goes. Now, up here where water reaches the shore, yeah, you're going to see some, wave action and billowing. There's going to be more movement here. But when water is at a distance from you, it reaches a level. So, and when I say reaches a level, you're going to see, this horizontal, it's going to look fairly horizontal. And I meant to get that photograph of this place so you could actually see what it looks like. but I don't have it. Wait a minute, let's see if I can lay my hands on it. Hopefully I can find it. Hmm. All right, maybe it was the week before that. I don't know why that is just kicking out like that. Hmm. Oh, here we go. I knew this was not that long ago that we were talking about this. Okay, so here you can see we've got these big slabs of rock that come into the water, and this almost looks like one um, big continuous line of rock. So let's redraw that. This is just a different example. We'll put this on the back of this. So as we're looking at this place, there are some little inclusions where maybe the water does go in there a little bit. And so I want you to be mindful of, this edge. It's not quite, I want you to just be mindful of where the edges are, and that, the water is going to appear level. So again, let's find our horizon line. We'll just put that up here really softly. And then we're going to find this long, low slab of rock. There's a little piece that juts out. There's another piece that it's kind of cleft off in shadow. Now there's a slab that's a little closer. And that comes up a little bit higher. And there's like a shrub type thing there. And then as this comes around the coast, there's actually little bits of rock that have, busted and piled up here. But then you can also see the water line. And we've got lots of big cracks that kind of follow the shape, follow the lay of this series of boulders. It's like a big rock face. So I'm just going to try to capture that rock face at first. And in here, you can see these smaller ones, these smaller rocks that I'm noticing. They're going to have a flat bottom because that's where the water comes up to. So you're not going to see little round blobbies like that. They're going to be flat on the bottom because that water level has come up to them. So instead of that, you're going to have that. It's going to, there's going to be where the water level is. That's what you're going to see, this flat edge down here. So what on earth? Why is this? Okay, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm really not understanding what Zoom is, why it's misbehaving today. Anyway, so we're going to try to continue on through this. So we've got these series of small rocks down here, and you can you don't have to copy your photographic reference verbatim, but use this as a jumping off point. You can see there's some water splash up here. So there's a little bit of that white wet sheen. And the surf wasn't really it wasn't a windy day and any big surf coming in. So it's a pretty calm day on the water. So anyway, as that comes closer, maybe some of these rocks are going to appear a little larger. Down near one of these cracks, there's a big crack in the surface that goes a little deeper. You'll see kind of a big crag. So again, if you've had my blind contour drawing, that's where you're keeping your eye on this as you're drawing this, and eventually you kind of want to um, get to where you do look at your paper, but I want you to go slowly as you're really looking at these edges. Where do these edges go, and what makes sense for your composition? So some of these rocks are going to have hard edges, I mean, very angular chopped off edges, and some are going to have some rounder, smoother edges because maybe they've been in the water a long time. Some are going to be kind of tipped up right, but you know that wherever they are, they're going to have a flat place on the bottom because that's where the water level is. So some of these rocks are going to be closer to you and some are going to be farther away. Here's this batch that's kind of half on the sand and half out into the water. So as you come down the end, I've kind of skipped this and made it a little bit shorter just so we can fit this on the page. Um, but generally speaking, that's how you would handle it, and the drawing part anyway. Let's see. So as we come past, we'll put another rock up here. So as we kind of come past these rocks, we'll have our shoreline coming in here, and it just goes off into the area there. And there's the wet sand down here. It's just a little bit on the inside of us. We're standing on the sand here, the water's out there. There's some, foamy white. So if we're smart, we can leave a little bit of the white paper for that. And And you can draw this in ink if you really want to beef it up a little bit, or you can just work it in pencil. Let me just throw in some trees just to fill up this shape up here. I'm just going to pencil those in, but you could, paint them directly if you wanted. Put a couple of trunks of trees in there. So we're just going to make some conifer shapes of these trees. I'm trying to remember that good recommendation of don't make any two intervals the same. Try to mix it up a little bit. Here's this tall conifer here. They all kind of tend to kind of blend together. There's a couple in here that there's a couple little sky holes where you can see through there. And they continue on over. And there's some brushy grasses over here. And we're just going to kind of generalize those. There's a couple of dark spaces in here. I mean, you can get really picky and start drawing every crack, but save something to paint. You don't have to draw everything. Just, focus on your big outer shapes. Now I'm going to get that horizon line off of this rock because I don't really need it. But I did want the horizon line because that's where the ocean, well, it's actually the Long Island Sound, but I call it the ocean because it connects to the ocean. That horizon is out there. You can see it comes up a little bit higher than your rock. This rock extends out. Oh, goodness gracious. This Zoom is giving me fits today. I'm so sorry, you guys. So you can see, like I was saying, the horizon line is out here. There's a ship way out there, but this rock face sticks way down into the water there. So as you're getting ready to paint your rocks, let me find the base of that one. So I'm going to start with a light warm color just to indicate where the sun is. Let's move this extra book out of the way. Um, Let me make a clean space for my rock colors. So you can see in the photograph that there's a big variety of gray colors out there. And from walking out there, I know that there's a lot of, see this warm light color? There's a lot of that, but this does get hit by water fairly frequently, even though it's pretty high. The average water mark is, the high tide mark is here. But, from storm surges and things like that, the water has come up over the edge for sure. Where the light is hitting the strongest, you're going to see that nice warm tone. And then there's this big variety of gray tones. And in the shadows is where the deepest, darkest areas are going to be. So let's think about that. I'll move this over here. So for a nice warm color, I'm going to start off with quinacridone gold. If you've got French ochre or raw sienna, those would be great too. If it's a little too pungent, maybe you want to tone it down with some little burnt sienna or maybe a little ultramarine or maybe both. And just a little, you don't need a whole lot to temper that color down. And then I'm gonna add some water and make this sort of like a coffee consistency. And I'm just going to bring that all across the surface of my rocks. I'm just going to run that in there really quickly. In fact, I'm going to even hit these small ones down here, the ones that are actually quite dark. But this way, I know I've got a sunlit surface on this. And usually in watercolor, you're working light to dark. So I'm going to lay that light tone in first. Now I want to think about where the dark areas are. So I'm going to come back and get some clean scratch paper down here. Re-wet some of these paints. So I'm going to come back and I'm going to mix a little bit of a gray out of ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna. And while that's still, drying and, still on the damp side, I'm going to start dropping this in. And hopefully it'll start spreading upwards into all that wet territory. I'm going to hit, all these little rocks down here. Got that bumpier surface. There is that really dark area that's sort of a kind of a crack. And we're going to bring this up into here. So this is a second pass, and if you've got it a dark enough value, that's probably all you need. If it dries, because as your watercolor dries, it will darken. I mean, it'll lighten about 20%. And so as it dries, if you feel like, oh my gosh, that's just way too faint, what happened to it? You can always go back in and lay another layer over it. So some of these that are down near the water they're almost all dark all the time. So I'm going to try to keep that bottom edge flat and dark because I'm keeping it flat because, like even the ones on the sand, they are, they're buried by sand. So that sand has come, leveled out right along that level edge of it. And the water, of course, water falls into a level. So it's, this edge where the water and the land meet, it's going to appear pretty level. So even though this is closer, so it's lower, this is the next thing up. And then, it just raises up ever so slightly as it goes further away. So if I wanted to, deepen this even more, I could bring in a little bit more pigment and drop that in again. So here we've got some of this rock face that has more of a gray tone on it. So I'm going to, and there's little bits of light in there. It's almost sections that are almost as light as that, but maybe it's a different kind of rock. Maybe it, excuse me, has had more water on it over the years. I'm not sure why that is a little bit darker, but it is. So I'm going to hit the face of that with a little bit of a light bluish gray, maybe a little bit more blue. And I'm going to water it down a little bit, and then I'm going to kind of bring some of that in, and it's going to tone down some of that warm face. But I want some of that warmth to show through, so I'm going to not paint everything, but I'm going to paint where I think I see some of the shadows. So you can see by keeping this more of a tea version over the coffee version, so the coffee has a little more, tiny bit more pigment in. Um, you can kind of see through this and see through to the warmth below it. Now, if I want to make some of these cracks, I can do the same thing. If I want the cracks to have a hard line and not be fuzzy and runny like this, I need to wait for that to dry. So while this is drying, let's tackle some of these other things. Usually I lay the sky in first, and I do it pretty quickly, but since I'm focusing mainly on rocks, let's just focus on how the sand and the water and the boulders would come together. So I'm going to look for a really pale sand tone. And again, I'm probably going to use, there's actually a little bit of pink in that. So I'm going to use this quinacridone gold and maybe a touch of um, quinacridone rose. And when I say touch, I mean just like the tip of my brush is going to go in that paint. Because I want to keep it, I want to keep it very light wash, but I'm also going to, I just want that little hint of color in there. And it has, just an undertone of pink. Let's see, I'm gonna see if I can pick up a little more with a bigger brush. And get that spread out. If I stayed with that smaller brush, it would take me forever to cover this. So I'm going to bring that into my water line because I really don't want a hard edge there. And the water's going to be coming up over that. So let's get to our water. You can see there's a little bit of variety in the water. You've got some reflection. These trees, you can see they're reflected in the water below it. There's some deep blues and then some medium blues. There's some areas where it gets shallower. There's a very pale blue. So, pay attention to the colors where things are darker. So let's get, I'm going to use this little part of the pan. Oh man, Zoom is getting a big F from me today. I'm not sure why that's doing that. It shouldn't have any internet outages around here. The weather's great. Don't know. There's no construction going on. No wire should be cut. Not sure what's going on. And I have my Wi-Fi booster installed, so I'm not sure why that's not helping out in this situation. Anyway, so let's get some beautiful color going here. I'm going to pick up some cobalt blue, and I'm going to make sure that both of these blues are quite wet. But let's get this in. I've got a fairly good sized brush. I need some more pigment. There we go, that's better. So on this top edge, I want that water to come up to the rocks because you'll see when we're looking beyond that rock, we see water. On this front edge, we can probably see where there's the foamy bits. And yes, I realize I should have left some white above there, above these small rocks, but we're just gonna come in here with a little closer, leave a little bit of white next to the bottom of those rocks on some of them. Okay, let's get a lot of this stroked in really quick. So I'm using a big, it's a Cheap Joe's brush. It's a Cheap Joe's Water Hawk. So I want most of my strokes to be horizontal. And as I come up to the water's edge here, I want to soften that edge so it sort of blends in with the sand. I'm going to also drop in some other colors. I want a little bit of deeper blue in the background. Let's see what I can come up with. All right, I'm going to drop in some of this ultramarine. Trying to keep a straight line here. And everything's wet, so it's going to fuse and soften and flow. I'm also going to bring in a little bit of this cobalt turquoise. That adds just a really pretty look. Just a couple areas. I don't want to blast it all over. Now, below these trees, so right below this, and actually the water comes in a little further, but let me drop in a little bit of, I'm going to mix up some sap green with a little burnt sienna, kind of dirty it down a little bit, maybe throw in a little quinacridone gold as well. And then I'm going to bring that right below here. And again, these lines I'm making are going to be horizontal. So it's moving closer to me, but they are horizontal. Now this one I would like to soften that. I'm going to bring some blue back into that. And so as we get to this edge, I want to soften it a little bit. So that is pretty much how you would paint rocks. You can continue to finesse those edges as this dries. Bring in um, some more of your dark color, and you don't want it really pasty dark. You still want it maybe like tea or coffee, and you can just indicate where some of the cracks are. You can use either a real small brush or one that has a good point. And I would, I think I would keep this watered down pretty softly because you don't really need, it's going to appear pretty dark against that light. And you don't want it standing out so hard that it looks like a giant spider crawling across your rock surface. So, this can be just sort of loosely indicated where you think you see, some of the biggest cracks, and where there's maybe a larger cleft in the rock, you can fill that in with your smaller brush or brush with a good point. So anyway, I just wanted to keep this quick and not let it get overwhelming. Um, you can, if you see more flat edges that need to be um, indicated, you can put those in. So this edge where things were in shadow makes this lower rock pop a little bit. Maybe there's a flat area on this rock. Maybe there's a dark underneath side on this one boulder that's behind this boulder. So again, to break it down, you're looking, generally speaking, where the shadows are and where the light is. I'm going to bring in a little more shadow near that bottom edge, because that really is kind of rests in the water line. And, as this is drying, and if you see areas that, maybe don't make sense, and you need to darken it a little bit, by all means, bring out another layer, bring out some more pigment, make it dark enough. Sometimes I think when we're working straight on a picture for too long, we get a little bit too attached to it. And sometimes I find it helpful either just turn it over, lean it against the wall, come back to it in an hour, maybe a couple of hours, and then you're going to see, things are going to stand out more. I think, though, when we're sitting and working on something a little too long, one, it either gets too precious and we don't notice, the errors that are going to glare at us later, or, maybe we don't like it because we think, oh, there's some kind of flaw with it. And then we come back later and it's like, wait, what was I thinking? That's actually fine. So anyway, when you are doing this, um, go slow. Look for the big shapes first, and only define the little ones after you've um, designated the bigger ones. I think I might go in and I'm gonna try something. So I noticed that some of the white foam is up above this outer edge of rocks. Um, we could have left the white of the paper, but we've got this light value area. I'm going to see if we make a range that's a little higher up, that because there is like this dark bar that goes across. Bring that across, and it's actually a little cooler tone than that. So let's bring in a little more blue in that. We'll bring that over to that shadow area on the rock. And we'll continue this across this way. So that's where that high water line is on there. I'm liking that a little better. So you can continue to putz around with those rocks and finesse them. But the one big recommendation that I have is be mindful of that bottom edge, and where your water goes. And as water is farther away, things are going to appear sort of horizontal. And it's only when you get close that you see these little swishy foam. I did not leave foam on my paper. You could go back and darken some of that in, but this was mainly about the rocks today. So I hope that little snippet about painting rocks helps. I tend to start with my lighter color, that light warm color, wherever the sun's hitting. I'm gonna start with that, and then layer on some of your darker colors, and that will give them a little bit of volume, um, a little bit of shape, so that if you want to go back, that same concept is pretty much how you could handle a rock wall. I started out with just a really pale wash on there because they're light gray rocks, and then would layer over some darker colors, darker grays. So you can essentially mix your grays from your three primaries, your a red, a yellow, and a blue. A lot of times I will mix a simple gray from ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And so in this case, your burnt sienna acts as a red. And you can, alter that too by adding a little quinacridone gold. The quinacridone gold acts like a yellow in that case. So you can kind of warm it or cool it as you need. So let's pop back up here. I hope that was helpful. I'm really sorry for the Zoom misbehaving. I'm not sure why. I hope I find out before my Tuesday class. Um, right now it's Thursday, and Zoom, man. Let's hope that doesn't happen anymore. All right. So anyway, thanks for stopping in with me. Um, Glad you're able to join me, and I hope that was helpful with the base of the rocks and how to, give them a little bit of form. Um, and if not, ask, tell me, if that worked for you or not. We shall see you soon. Thanks again.